Greg Mason pointed to the diagram of a cell on the whiteboard as 28 pairs of eyes struggled to stay focused. It was 9:15 on a Tuesday morning at Pinewood High School in rural Montana, and biology class was in full swing. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, Greg explained for what felt like the 1,000th time in his teaching career. He noticed Kyle Rodriguez in the back row fighting to keep his eyes open. Next to him, Amber Lewis was at least pretending to take notes. Though Greg suspected she was doodling, outside the October sky was clear and blue. The mountains in the distance stood tall against the horizon, and the school's football field was visible from the second-floor classroom window. It was an ordinary day in every way, until it wasn't. The lights flickered once, then again. Lariakaing paused mid-sentence about cellular respiration. The school's ancient electrical system often acted up, especially in the older West Wing where his classroom was located. "Mr. Mason," Amber said, suddenly alert. She pointed to the window. "What's that?" Greg turned to look where she was pointing. Strange lights blinked in the sky, moving in patterns that no aircraft should move. As he walked closer to the window, more students noticed and got up from their seats. "Sit down, everyone," Greg said automatically, though his eyes remained fixed on the lights. They were getting larger, closer. The classroom phone rang. Greg picked it up to hear the voice of Donna White, the school principal. "Good morning, Pinewood High. This is Principal White with your morning announcements. Remember that club sign-ups are due by Thursday and the cafeteria will be serving—" Her voice cut off suddenly. There was a pause, then, "What on earth is that noise?" The classroom speakers went silent. Then came a sound that shook the building. A deep, thunderous roar that rattled the windows and knocked books off shelves. Students gasped and several ducked under their desks, their lockdown training kicking in automatically. "It's not a drill," Greg said, his mind racing. "Everyone away from the windows now." The sky darkened as three massive shapes broke through. The clouds. They were unlike any aircraft Greg had ever seen, smooth, oval-shaped with glowing blue lights along their undersides. Each was the size of a football field, hovering directly above the school. The PA system crackled to life again. Principal White's voice was steady but urgent. "This is a lockdown, this is not a drill. All students and staff follow lockdown procedures immediately. I repeat, this is not a drill." Greg locked the classroom door and turned off the lights. "Under the desks away from windows," he instructed. Years of school shooting drills had prepared them for hiding, but not for what happened next. A beam of greenish light shot down from the center ship, touching down on the football field. The ground shook. Then another beam and another, each landing at different points around the school. "Are those aliens?" Kyle asked, his voice cracking. Before Greg could answer, smaller craft began to descend from the three motherships. They looked like metallic teardrops, each about the size of a car. They landed in the parking lot, on the basketball courts, and on the field. Greg's phone buzzed with a text message from Frank Collins, the history teacher and retired Marine. "Not domestic threat. Rally in cafeteria. Bring students." Greg stared at the message. Not domestic threat was an understatement. "Listen up," he said to his frightened students. "We need to move to the cafeteria. Stay low, stay quiet, stay together." As they prepared to leave, Greg saw the first of them emerge from the landed craft. They walked on two legs but were clearly not human. Tall, with bluish-gray skin and what looked like armor covering their bodies. They carried objects that even Greg, with no military experience, recognized as weapons. "They're heading for the entrances," Greg whispered. He counted at least 20 of the beings moving with military precision toward the school doors. In the hallway, other teachers were also moving their students toward the cafeteria. Nancy Reed, the art teacher, shepherded her class while carrying supplies from her classroom. When Greg raised an eyebrow, she simply said, "Art materials are more useful than you'd think." They heard the first boom as something hit the main entrance doors. Then another louder crash followed by the sound of breaking glass. "They're inside," someone whispered. The school's old intercom system crackled, and a voice spoke, but not in English. It was a series of clicks and hums that made the hair on Greg's arms stand up. When they reached the cafeteria, Greg saw that Frank Collins had already transformed it into a command center. The retired Marine was directing staff and older students, his face grim but determined. "The aliens have breached the east and south entrances," Frank said when he spotted Greg. "They're moving in search patterns consistent with military training." "Why? Are they here? What do they want?" asked Lisa Garcia, the gym teacher. "Based on their movements, they think this is a military installation," Frank replied. "Their intelligence is wrong, but that won't help us if they decide to eliminate everyone inside." In the corner, Joe Diaz, the school janitor, was opening his maintenance closet and pulling out tools. 30 years as a combat engineer before becoming a janitor, he explained as he started distributing wrenches, hammers, and other tools. "Never thought I'd need those skills here." Principal White arrived with the last group of students from the administrative wing. "I've called emergency services, but they seemed confused. Help will be slow coming. We're on our own for now." Greg looked around the cafeteria at the faces of his colleagues and students. The fear was evident, but so was something else: determination. "What's the plan?" Greg asked Frank. "We defend our school," Frank replied simply. "Olivia," he called to, the chemistry teacher, "what can you make with your classroom supplies that might slow them down?" Olivia Patel smiled grimly. "Give me 20 minutes and some volunteers who paid attention in class." "Peter," Frank addressed a thin boy with glasses who headed the computer club, "can you access the school's systems from here? Cameras, doors, communications?" Peter Johnson nodded, already pulling out his laptop. "Yes, sir, give me 5 minutes." "Lisa, I need your athletes organized into runner teams. Joe will need help setting up barricades." As people moved with purpose, Greg realized something important was happening. This wasn't panic. This was organization. Humans defending their own. Outside the cafeteria windows, they could see more alien craft landing. The invaders clearly expected an easy mission. They had no idea what awaited them inside Pinewood High School. A loud bang echoed from the hallway leading to the cafeteria. The aliens were getting closer. "They're coming," Greg said. Frank nodded. "Let them come. They picked the wrong school to invade." Amber, who had been quiet since they left the classroom, stepped forward. "Mr. Collins, I have an idea about those smoke detectors in the hallway." Frank looked at her with raised eyebrows. "My dad's a firefighter," she explained. "I know how they work, and how to make them work differently." As she outlined her plan, Greg saw the first glimmer of what might be hope. These aliens, whoever they were, had made a critical error in their planning. They had attacked a school full of humans. Not soldiers, not warriors. Just ordinary people protecting their own. And that, as the aliens were about to learn, was the most dangerous kind of human there was. The aliens moved through the halls of Pinewood High School with weapons raised. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with thick bluish-gray skin that looked tough as leather. Their eyes were large and yellow with vertical pupils that reminded Greg of cats. They wore what looked like armor made of some dark metal, and their helmets had tubes connecting to small tanks on their backs. Frank Collins watched them through the cafeteria's small window. "Their breathing equipment," he whispered, pointing to the tanks. "They might need special air." Joe Diaz nodded. "Weakness number 1, he said softly. The janitor had already gathered a team of senior boys who were using cafeteria tables to build barricades at all entrances except one. "Always leave one way out," Joe had explained. In the kitchen area, Betty Martinez and her cafeteria staff were boiling large pots of water and oil. Betty, a grandmother of 5 with arms strong from decades of food preparation, looked fiercer than Greg had ever seen her. "First alien that comes through that door gets this right in its face," she said, lifting a pot of bubbling liquid. Olivia Patel had taken over a corner of the cafeteria with her chemistry students. They were mixing cleaning supplies with chemicals from her classroom that one brave student had retrieved. "We're making something like tear gas," Olivia explained to Principal White, "and a few other surprises." Peter Johnson sat cross-legged on the floor, his laptop open and 3 phones around him. His fingers flew over the keyboard. I'm in, he announced. I have access to all cameras, door controls, and the PA system. His face was pale but determined. I can lock or unlock any electronic door in the school from here. Lisa Garcia had organized the athletes and drama students into teams. Runners will carry messages if phones stop working, she explained. And the drama kids are making disguises with their makeup kits. If we need to move through alien-controlled areas, we might fool them at a distance. Frank clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. They're searching room by room. We have maybe 15 minutes before they reach us. Here's the plan. He quickly divided them into defense teams. Some would stay in the cafeteria to protect the younger students. Others would move to strategic positions throughout the school. Remember, Frank said, they think we're military. Let's use that. They'll expect organized resistance, not creative chaos. Greg found himself assigned to a team with Heather Scott, the school nurse. Their job was to set up a medical station in the library, which was connected to the cafeteria by a short hallway. Grab anything we might need for injuries, Heather instructed as they hurried down the hall. Cloth for bandages, alcohol for disinfecting, splints for broken bones. In the library, they moved quickly, clearing tables and setting up stations. 2 senior students who had first aid training joined them. Mr. Mason, one of them said, pointing to the window. Outside, more alien ships were landing, but now there was something else. Black military helicopters in the distance. Help is coming, Greg said, but we need to hold out until it arrives. A crackling sound came over their earpieces, modified Bluetooth headsets that Peter had connected to a private channel. They've reached the science wing, Peter's voice reported. I've locked all the doors, but they're breaking through. Execute Phase 1, Frank's voice replied. Throughout the school, teams moved into position. In the chemistry lab, a group of seniors led by Olivia released a mixture into the ventilation system that would spread to the east wing, where aliens were concentrated. In the gymnasium, Joe and his team had rigged the sprinkler system to release a special mixture when activated. East Wing team report, Frank called through the comm. They're coughing, came the response from a student watching through a security camera feed. The mixture is affecting them. They're removing their helmets. That's what we wanted, Olivia said, her voice tight with tension. Their breathing equipment must filter our air for them. Without it, our atmosphere irritates them. A loud explosion rocked the building. What was that? Greg asked, steadying himself against a bookshelf. They're using explosives on the locked doors, Peter reported. They've breached the math department. 6 aliens moving toward the west stairwell. Greg looked around the library. At the makeshift medical station they'd created, it wouldn't be safe for long. We need to move deeper into the building, Heather said, reading his thoughts. Another explosion, closer this time, followed by the sound of gunfire. Not the familiar pop of human weapons, but a high-pitched whine followed by sizzling sounds. Energy weapons, Frank's voice said over the comm. Stay behind solid cover, walls won't protect you. In the hallway outside the library, Greg heard the heavy footsteps of the aliens. He and Heather quickly moved their medical supplies into a small office at the back of the library. Through the small window in the office door, Greg saw 3 aliens enter the library. They moved methodically, checking behind bookshelves and under tables. When one came close to the office, Greg held his breath. Just as the alien reached for the door handle, the sprinkler system activated. Instead of water, a thick, soapy mixture rained down. The alien slipped, crashing into a table. The other 2 also struggled to keep their footing on the suddenly slippery floor. Now, Frank's voice commanded through the comm. From hidden positions around the library, students armed with fire extinguishers sprayed the aliens. The carbon dioxide seemed to burn their exposed skin where they had removed their helmets, causing them to screech in pain. A high, piercing sound that hurt Greg's ears. In the confusion, a team led by Lisa Garcia burst into the library from the opposite entrance. They carried baseball bats from the gym and moved with coordination that spoke of hours spent on the playing field. They targeted the aliens' legs, avoiding the armored upper bodies and the weapons. 1 alien fell, then another. The third managed to fire its weapon, sending a bolt of energy into a bookshelf that burst into flames. But before it could fire again, Betty Martinez appeared in the doorway and threw a pot of boiling water directly at its face. The alien's scream was cut short as it collapsed. "Secure their weapons," Frank ordered through the comm as he entered the library, "and their breathing equipment intact if possible." As students carefully approached the fallen aliens, Greg noticed they were still breathing. "They're alive," he said. Frank nodded. "Good. We want prisoners, not casualties." Outside, the sound of helicopters was growing louder. Through the windows, Greg could see military aircraft circling the school. "Peter," Frank called through the comm, "can you broadcast on all frequencies? Let the military know we're here and fighting back." "Working on it," Peter replied. "But we have another problem. I'm watching their main ship through the roof cameras. They're bringing in something big." Everyone looked up as a deep vibration ran through the building. "What is that?" Heather asked. Frank's face was grim. "Reinforcements. They're not giving up." Outside, a much larger craft was descending towards the football field. Its shadow fell across the library windows, plunging the room into darkness. "All teams fall back to central positions," Frank ordered. "This isn't over yet." Greg looked at the fallen aliens, then at the students who had helped take them down. Young faces, some scared, some determined, all of them ordinary kids who had done something extraordinary. And he knew whatever came next, these kids, these humans, would not give up their school without a fight. The new alien ship hovered over the football field, twice the size of the earlier crafts. A beam of light shot down from its center, and a platform descended. On it stood a tall figure in elaborate armor, surrounded by what appeared to be guards. "That's their leader," Frank said, watching through binoculars from a second-floor window. "They're setting up a command post on the field." Peter's voice came through the comm system. "I've tapped into their communications. It's mostly clicks and whistles, but there are patterns. They keep repeating something that sounds like Zextor. Probably a name or rank," Frank replied. "What else can you tell us?" "They're confused," Peter said. "They expected to capture the building quickly. They don't understand why training cadets are putting up such a fight." Greg looked at Frank. "They really think we're a military school?" Frank nodded. "Their intelligence is way off, and we can use that." The building shook as another explosion rocked the West Wing. Through the comms, they heard panicked voices. "Room 237 is cut off," Lisa reported. "Steve Wright and about 15 other students are trapped with Mrs. Cooper. The aliens have set up a command center in the gym," another voice added. "They're bringing in equipment." Frank looked grim. "They're digging in for a siege. We need to rescue room 237 before they sweep that section." In the now crowded cafeteria, most of the younger students huddled together. Some cried quietly while others sat in shocked silence. A few older students tried to comfort them, telling stories and organizing simple games to keep their minds occupied. Principal White moved among them, her calm presence reassuring. "You're all being so brave," she told them. "Help is coming." Outside, military helicopters circled but kept their distance. The alien ships had erected some kind of energy field around the school grounds that prevented approach. Frank gathered a rescue team. "Greg, I need you. And Joe. We're going to get those kids out of room 237. Greg swallowed hard but nodded. Joe appeared with a bag of tools and what looked like homemade smoke bombs. "The ventilation system runs above that classroom," Joe explained. "We can use it to get in without being seen." Richard Brown, the band director, approached them with what looked like modified musical instruments. "Sound disruption," he explained. "These aliens respond badly to certain frequencies. My students tested it on the ones we captured. It disorients them." Frank nodded. "Good work. We'll take them." As they prepared to leave, Olivia handed each of them a small spray bottle. "This will temporarily blind them if you hit their eyes. Be careful with it. It's potent." The rescue team moved quietly through the school, using Peter's guidance via comms to avoid alien patrols. When they reached the access point for the ventilation system, Joe quickly removed the panel, and they climbed in one by one. The metal duct was tight and uncomfortable. Greg, crawling behind Frank, tried not to think about how vulnerable they were. If the aliens discovered them here, there would be nowhere to run. Almost there, Joe whispered from the front. I can see the grate for room 237. Through gaps in the vent cover, Greg could see the classroom below. Mrs. Cooper, the English teacher, stood protectively near a group of students huddled at the back of the room. Steve Wright, a tall junior and the basketball team captain, was helping another student barricade the door with desks and cabinets. Outside in the hallway, they could hear the heavy footsteps of alien guards. Joe carefully removed the vent cover and signaled to Mrs. Cooper. She looked up, eyes widening in surprise, then quickly motioned for the students to remain quiet. We're going to get you out, Frank whispered down to them, but we need a distraction first. Maria Lopez, president of the debate team, stepped forward. We have an idea, she said, pointing to a collection of strange devices on Mrs. Cooper's desk. The students made them from my lesson materials, Mrs. Cooper explained. Sound makers, flash devices, even some small projectile launchers based on the physics principles they learned last semester. Frank smiled. Perfect. Here's the plan. When I give the signal, launch your devices at the door. We'll drop down and take out any aliens that come to investigate, then get you all into the vents. Mrs. Cooper nodded and quietly instructed her students. They moved with surprising coordination, setting up their homemade devices aimed at the door. Frank clicked his comm 3 times, the signal to Peter to begin the larger distraction. Throughout the school, fire alarms suddenly blared. Sprinklers, activated in selected areas, and doors locked or unlocked in patterns designed to confuse the aliens. In the hallway outside room 237, the alien guards looked around in confusion as lights flickered and strange noises echoed from different directions. Now, Frank called Mrs. Cooper's students activated their devices. The classroom door, already weakened from alien attempts to break it down, burst open as a barrage of flashbang contraptions and smoke bombs exploded in the hallway. Frank, Greg, and Joe dropped down from the vent. 2 alien guards stumbled into the room, temporarily blinded by the students' devices. The rescue team quickly overpowered them using Olivia's spray and Richard's sound disruptors. Everyone up into the vent quickly, Frank ordered as he secured the aliens' weapons. One by one, the students climbed on desks and were lifted into the ventilation shaft. Mrs. Cooper went last, pausing to grab her bag. My students' assignments, she explained with a small smile. They worked hard on them. Just as Greg was helping Mrs. Cooper into the vent, a much larger alien appeared in the doorway. It wore more elaborate armor than the others, with symbols that suggested higher rank. Zextor, Greg whispered, recognizing the name Peter had mentioned. The alien commander looked at the humans with yellow eyes that showed intelligence and fury. It raised its weapon. Without hesitation, Steve Wright, who was helping lift people into the vent, hurled a heavy textbook directly at the alien's face. The unexpected action caused Zextor to fire wildly, missing everyone but hitting a pipe behind Greg. Steam exploded from the broken pipe, filling the room with a thick fog. In the confusion, Greg pulled Mrs. Cooper into the vent and scrambled in after her. Frank and Joe were the last ones in, pulling the vent cover closed behind them. Move, Frank whispered urgently as alien reinforcements flooded the classroom below. The expanded group crawled through the ventilation system, guided by Joe's knowledge of the school's layout. Below them, they could hear the aliens searching, sometimes firing weapons that punched holes through the metal ducts just behind them. Left here, Joe instructed. This will take us to the library. As they moved, Greg could feel the ventilation system beginning to sag under their combined weight. Metal groaned and screws popped loose. We're too heavy, he warned. Before anyone could respond, the section of duct they were in tore free from its moorings and collapsed, sending them tumbling down into a hallway, right in the middle of an alien patrol. For a moment, humans and aliens stared at each other in shock. Then both sides reacted at once. The students deployed their remaining devices while Frank and Joe tackled the nearest aliens. Greg grabbed a fallen alien weapon and, after a moment of hesitation, fired it at the ceiling above the remaining aliens. The energy beam cut through the supports, bringing down a section of ceiling tiles and electrical wiring on top of them. Run! Frank shouted, pointing toward the cafeteria. "We're exposed here!" As they ran, Greg looked back to see Zextor stepping over the debris, watching them with those intelligent yellow eyes. The alien commander made no move to pursue them, but somehow that was more frightening than if it had given chase. It was studying them, learning. And Greg knew the real battle was just beginning. Night fell over Pinewood High School. The aliens had set up bright lights around the building, turning the football field into a glowing base of operations. Inside, the humans had gathered in the central area of the school, which included the cafeteria, library, and main hallway. They had created a defendable position using everything from desks to vending machines as barricades. Greg looked at the tired faces around him. They had been fighting for nearly 12 hours. Food and water were running low. Several students and teachers had minor injuries, which Heather was treating with dwindling medical supplies. "We need a new plan," Frank said, gathering the adults and older students. "They're bringing in reinforcements. We can't hold out much longer." Principal White nodded. "The military is outside the energy barrier but can't get through. They've been trying to communicate with us." Peter raised his hand. "I think I can help with that. I've been studying the aliens' communication devices from the ones we captured. They use a frequency our phones can't access, but I might be able to modify one to reach outside." "Do it," Frank said. "We need to coordinate with the military if we're going to survive this." As Peter went to work, Olivia approached with a serious expression. "I've been analyzing their breathing equipment," she said. "Their air tanks contain a mixture that's different from our atmosphere. When they're exposed to our air for too long, they seem to struggle." Greg remembered how the aliens had reacted when forced to remove their helmets. "Can we use that?" Olivia nodded. "I think so. If we could release the right chemical compound into the air around the school, it might react with their breathing mixture. Not lethal, but definitely disabling." "What do you need?" Frank asked. "More chemicals than I have. Some are in the science lab, but that's in the West Wing, which they control now." Sam Baker, a parent who had been at the school for a meeting when the attack began, spoke up. "I'm a mechanic. My shop is just down the road. If we could get there, we might find some of what you need. And we could use my tools to modify the school buses," Joe added. "Turn them into something that could break through their lines." Frank looked thoughtful. "A small team might be able to slip out. The aliens are focused on getting in, not keeping us from getting out." "I'll go," Sam volunteered. "I know my shop." "I'll go too," Greg said, surprising himself. "You'll need help carrying supplies." Lisa stepped forward. "My seniors and I can create a distraction on the opposite side of the building." Frank nodded. "Let's do it. But first, let's see what Peter can do with communications." Peter had dismantled an alien device and connected parts of it to his laptop. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he wrote code that none of them understood. "Almost there," he muttered. "Their encryption is complex but follows patterns." Suddenly, his screen lit up with text. "I'm in. I've accessed their communication network." Everyone gathered around. On the screen, strange symbols appeared, then began to transform into English as Peter's program translated. "They're talking about us," Peter said, reading the messages. "They're confused about why a cadet training facility is so difficult to capture. They're calling for a final assault at dawn." Frank's face grew even more serious. "How long until dawn?" "About 6 hours," Greg said, checking his watch. "Then we have 6 hours to prepare." "Peter, can you send a message to the military?" Peter nodded. "I think so. I can bounce it through the alien network, disguised as their own communications. Tell them we need a coordinated attack when we give the signal. We'll try to disable the energy barrier from inside." As Peter sent the message, Greg and Sam prepared for their mission to the auto shop. They gathered small backpacks and listed the chemicals and tools they would need. "Be careful," Heather said, handing them small first aid kits. "If you're injured out there, you're on your own." Lisa and her team moved to the east side of the building. "We'll set off the chemistry lab supplies we salvaged earlier," she explained. "Should create enough noise and light to draw them away from the south exit." At Frank's signal, Lisa's team began their distraction. Explosions and bright flashes erupted from the east wing. Alien guards raced toward the commotion, leaving the south exit less protected. Greg and Sam slipped out into the night. They stayed low, using trees and parked cars as cover. The cool night air felt strange after hours inside the hot, crowded school. They made it to the edge of the school grounds where the energy barrier shimmered like a transparent wall. Greg reached out cautiously, expecting to be shocked, but his hand passed through with only a slight tingling sensation. It's designed to keep things out, not in, he realized. They hurried through the darkness toward Sam's auto shop, half a mile, down the road. Twice they had to hide as alien scout ships passed overhead, searchlights sweeping the ground. The shop was dark when they arrived. Sam unlocked it quickly and they slipped inside. "Grab everything on Olivia's list," Sam instructed, turning on a flashlight rather than the main lights. "I'll get my tools and some other things we might need." Greg moved through the shop, collecting chemicals used for car maintenance. Many of them were caustic or flammable, perfect for Olivia's purposes. Sam, meanwhile, gathered tools and began filling containers with gasoline. "For the buses," he explained. "And I have an idea for the energy barrier." They worked quickly, filling their backpacks and 2 large duffel bags. As they prepared to leave, headlights swept across the front of the shop. They froze. Outside, a pickup truck had pulled up. A man got out and approached the shop door. "That's Dan Willis," Sam whispered. "Local rancher. He's a friend." Sam opened the door before Dan could knock. The rancher jumped in surprise, then relaxed when he recognized Sam. "Sam? What are you doing here in the dark? The whole town's talking about some kind of attack at the school. Military's got roads blocked." "It's aliens, Dan," Sam said simply. "They've taken over the school. We're fighting back." Dan stared for a moment, then nodded as if this made perfect sense. "What do you need?" "A ride back would be nice," Greg said. "And maybe some of the fertilizer from your ranch?" "Fertilizer?" Dan looked confused. "Ammonium nitrate," Greg explained. "Olivia, our chemistry teacher, can use it." Dan didn't hesitate. "I've got bags of it in my truck right now. Was delivering it tomorrow." With Dan's help, they loaded their supplies and the fertilizer into his truck. As they drove back toward the school, Dan pointed to his rifle rack. "Got my hunting rifles if you need them." Frank shook his head. "Their armor's too strong for bullets, but thanks." They stopped a safe distance from the school. The energy barrier glowed faintly in the darkness. Beyond it, they could see the alien ships and the bright lights of their command center. "How do we get back in?" Greg wondered. Sam grinned and pulled out what looked like a modified car battery attached to wires. "This should disrupt the barrier long enough for us to slip through." He connected the device to the truck's battery for additional power, aimed it at the barrier and flipped a switch. The section of energy field in front of them flickered and dimmed. "Now!" Sam shouted. They grabbed their supplies and ran toward the flickering barrier. Greg felt the tingling sensation much stronger this time as they pushed through, but they made it. Behind them, Dan called out, "I'll spread the word. Help is coming." They hurried back to the south entrance where Joe was waiting to let them in. Inside, Olivia rushed forward to inspect their haul. "This is perfect," she said, examining the chemicals. "I can start working immediately." Sam laid out his tools. "And I can start on the buses." Frank looked at the supplies, then at the tired, but determined faces around him. "We have 4 hours until dawn," he said. "Let's make them count." Greg watched as everyone moved with renewed purpose. Outside, alien ships continued to land, bringing more troops. But for the first time since the attack began, he felt something like hope. They had a plan. They had help coming, and most importantly, they had something worth fighting for. Dawn approached with a faint glow on the eastern horizon. Inside Pinewood High School, everyone was in position. The past 4 hours had been a blur of activity as they prepared for the final confrontation. Olivia and her chemistry students had created large quantities of their special compound. "When released into the air, it will react with their breathing mixture," she explained. "It won't kill them, but they'll be disoriented and weakened." Sam and Joe had modified 3 school buses. They had reinforced the fronts with metal plates. From the shop class in the cafeteria kitchen, the windows were covered with wire mesh and the tires were wrapped with chains for extra traction. "They'll break through their lines," Sam said, wiping grease from his hands, "and disable the energy barrier generators we spotted on the field." Peter had maintained contact with the military outside. "They're ready," he reported. "Attack helicopters and ground forces are in position. They'll move in as soon as we bring down the barrier." Principal White had organized the younger students into the most protected area of the cafeteria. They sat in small groups, some sleeping against each other, others wide awake with fear and excitement. "Whatever happens," she told them, "remember how brave you've been. Your parents will be so proud." Frank gathered everyone for final instructions. "Group 1 will drive the buses to take out the barrier generators. Group 2 will release Olivia's compound near their command center. Group 3 will create multiple distractions to divide their forces. Everyone else stays here to protect the students." Greg found himself assigned to Group 2 with Olivia and several seniors. They would use the ventilation system to reach the roof, where they could release the compound directly above the alien command post. As they checked their equipment one last time, Frank approached Greg. "You've done well," he said simply, "for a biology teacher." Greg smiled. "You too, for a history teacher." They shook hands, both knowing the danger ahead. Outside, the alien forces were gathering. Through Peter's surveillance, they watched as Zextor addressed his troops. The alien commander pointed at the school repeatedly, his gestures angry and forceful. "He's under pressure to finish this," Frank noted. "That makes him dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes." At exactly 5:30 a.m., Frank gave the signal. "Operation Schools Out begins now." Group 3 launched their distractions first. All around the school, homemade explosives went off. The school's sprinkler system activated in select areas, releasing mixtures created by Olivia's team. The fire alarms blared, and through the PA system, Richard broadcast sound frequencies that disoriented the aliens. As alien troops rushed to respond to the chaos, Group 1 moved out. Sam, Joe, and several parents who had experience driving large vehicles took the wheels of the modified buses. They burst from the gym doors, engines roaring, and headed straight for the energy barrier generators. Alien guards fired at the buses, but the reinforced metal plates deflected most hits. One bus took heavy damage but still managed to crash into a generator, destroying it in a shower of sparks. The other 2 buses hit their targets seconds later. The energy barrier flickered and died. "Barrier down," Peter shouted into his communication device, signaling the military. Immediately, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air as military forces moved in. The aliens, caught by surprise, began to retreat toward their ships. Greg's group was already moving through the ventilation system toward the roof. They carried containers of Olivia's compound, ready to release it over the main alien position. When they reached the roof, they saw the battle unfolding below. The modified school buses had created paths through the alien lines. Military helicopters were engaging the smaller alien ships. On the football field, Zextor was shouting orders, trying to organize a defense around the main ship. "Perfect target," Olivia said, pointing to the command group. "Release the compound on my mark." They positioned themselves on the section of roof directly above the field and opened their containers. The wind carried the invisible compound down toward the aliens. The effect was almost immediate. Alien soldiers began to stagger and remove their helmets, struggling to breathe. Some fell to their knees while others rushed back toward their ships. Zextor, protected by a more advanced suit, remained standing. He looked up, directly at Greg and his group on the roof. Their eyes met across the distance, alien and human, predator and prey, though it was no longer clear which was which. The alien commander raised his weapon. Greg ducked as energy bolts hit the roof around them. "Back inside," Olivia shouted. They scrambled back toward the ventilation entrance. Just as Greg was about to climb in, the section of roof beneath him collapsed from the weapon fire. He fell, sliding down the damaged roof toward the edge. His hands scraped against the rough surface as he tried to stop his fall. Just before he went over the edge, he caught hold of a lightning rod. dangling 20 feet above the ground. Below him, aliens were retreating to their ships. Military personnel were advancing across the field, and directly beneath him stood Zextor, looking up with those intelligent yellow eyes. The alien raised his weapon again, aiming directly at Greg. Greg closed his eyes, certain his time had come. The shot never came. When Greg looked again, Principal White stood behind Zextor, holding what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a stun baton. The alien commander lay on the ground, immobilized. "No one threatens my teachers," Principal White said, looking up at Greg with a small smile. "Hang on, help is coming." Military helicopters landed on the field. Soldiers secured alien prisoners and helped the humans who had fought so bravely. Medical teams rushed to treat the injured. As the main alien ship prepared to depart defeated, Peter's voice came over the comm system. "They're sending a message to their fleet. I'm translating it now." Everyone listened as Peter read, "Warning to all Krazak forces. Earth educational facilities are not military training centers as our intelligence suggested. They are something far more dangerous, places where young humans are protected by adults willing to die for them. Under no circumstances engage such facilities again. The cost is too high." By mid-morning it was over. Parents arrived in a flood of tearful reunions as military personnel debriefed the staff and older students. Government scientists examined the alien technology left behind. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the story to a stunned world. 1 year later, on the anniversary of what became known as the Battle of Pinewood High, a ceremony was held on the rebuilt football field. Principal White stood at a podium looking out at the assembled students, staff, and community members. "Today we remember not just what we endured, but what we learned," she said. "We learned that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when protecting those they care about. We learned that knowledge, biology, chemistry, physics, even literature, and art can be just as powerful as any weapon." She gestured to a small monument that had been erected near the school entrance. On it was inscribed, "Pinewood High School, where Earth taught its first lesson to the stars." In the years that followed, Earth prepared for possible future encounters with alien species. Defense systems were built and protocols were established. But the most effective deterrent proved to be much simpler. In the galactic database of the Krazak and other spacefaring species, a special warning was attached to Earth's entry. "Approach with extreme caution. Avoid structures marked with yellow. Transport vehicles. These contain young humans and their protectors, the most dangerous force in the known universe, and that is why no alien has ever again dared to attack a human school."